2 games remaining in a season that has seen Manchester United reclaim that glorious place in the Champions League next season, amidst everything that we have seen from queries and questions and speculation about permanent appointments to arrivals and departures and whatever else can rear its head along the way. It's all very interesting, and it's what keeps us coming back here every single week, Mr. Phil Brown. How are you doing?
I've been doing all right, mate. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I noticed you've a little bit of makeup on there. Have you? Have you done something to yourself?
Talking when I should have been listening. I know. As I've covered on Twitter, had a bit of an interesting week. I had a seizure, so out of nowhere, which is the first one I've ever had in my life. I'd regained consciousness, then we banging my face off the ground. So I have. This is probably better. This is the best it's looked actually in a week, or since it's happened more or less. But life goes on, mate. You know, you realize how short it is. We're going through all the tests now, and like it scared the shit out of me. I'll be honest, like. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah, I can only imagine just how scary that is. But I mean, you're looking well. You're feeling better now.
Well, anyone close to me knows I've not. I mean, dealing with this issue internally, where I keep getting really lightheaded and really dizzy. And this has been going on for a couple of months, and I'm starting to get memory issues, which is a concern. Like, it's really embarrassing, you know, seeing people that you know really well, and when you see them, you think you're seeing them for the first time. It's embarrassing, but yeah, I mean, other than outside of the dizziness and stuff like that, I have occasional sickness where I throw up. I was throwing up last Thursday. Or before that, the day before it's happened. I don't know, mate. Everything else, I take care of myself, and I don't know why this happened. We're going through all those brain scans now to see what caused it, and hopefully it doesn't happen again, because I don't want to lose my driving license or anything. So, saying my head's sore, I have bad headaches, but we'll see what happens, mate.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, but
Okay, but
hopefully all of the test results come back somewhat positive for you, and there's at least some bit of resolution as to how you can move forward and not have to wake up with any shiners or any pains in the side of your head again, because obviously everybody wants you to be fit and firing and healthy, and at the very least you have some bit of positive news with Manchester United to keep your spirits raised at this moment in time. And obviously today, when we're recording and we're speaking, it now seems what has been an inevitable conclusion for quite some time, that Michael Carrick is going to have formal discussions with hierarchy following recommendations coming from Ineos' sporting department and those working closely with Carrick on a daily basis, that he is the man seen as the appropriate solution to lead this team next season into the Champions League and thereon forward. What is the immediate response to that? I mean, outside of expectation for what we've discussed in recent weeks, you pleased with this?
I mean, you'd imagine that a lot of the momentum now with Carrick is a result of eliminating other candidates rather than finding anything more out about Carrick they didn't know a month ago or 2 months ago. You know, I would be surprised. Obviously, Champions League football was a big factor, but as far as Carrick, the person, the manager, what have you, it's hard for me to believe they would have learned anything new about him. Where now, as a result of what we've seen, you know, after the Sunderland game, we'll commence talking discussions, because we've now been satisfied. We've reached a threshold where we're convinced by Carrick. I think if you look at Real Madrid, going back from Mourinho, there's just not a dearth of options out there outside of Carrick that are obvious. And that was the other thing, is United weren't really being heavily linked with anyone else. And when you know you have someone with a certain propinquity to the manager's job, but then I think you see it being heavily covered in the media. It's hard to have that cover, hard to keep that under wraps, and we didn't see any of that. And I think it's been relatively obvious it's a one-horse race for a while.
It's an awkward situation for them, though, in all fairness. I'm looking at it from a very simplistic perspective, not about who else is available on the market, not about what else any other tactician would be able to do with the football club. I'm looking at what a guy is doing right now. And, 10 wins, 3 draws, 2 defeats, 66.7% win ratio. Ironically, that's the same figure that he achieved during his short spell previously. But you're not going to get much better than that anywhere, regardless of anything. And this is a guy who's come in, as we said previously, he's doing it with somebody else's team, with very little preparation time. He's had no preseason, he's had no nothing. He's had to pick them back up after they were down, having lost yet another manager. But the real awkward thing that you have here, and I have to feel sympathetic in certain sections for those above him and that wear suits in the boardroom level, because they're really stuck between a rock and a hard place, Phil. If they were to go and make a decision to bring in another manager, another continental manager, and then it doesn't work, or he doesn't hit the ground running, or there's questions within the opening few months about how he's doing, then naturally they're going to be held accountable for why did you get rid of Michael Carrick when he was doing so well.
Mhm.
You flip it over. Carrick is doing well. You keep him on board. It makes sense. If it doesn't work out, then people start automatically asking the question about why didn't you bring in X, Y, or Z when you had the opportunity in the summer instead of repeating the same mistakes with this narrative that we're hearing about recreating what we've had with Solskjaer previously. They don't really have any positive rod to back themselves or support their decisions here because they're going to be scrutinized and criticized regardless what they do.
Yeah, I do sympathize a bit with that, but that's why they're paid the big bucks, not to make the
Mm.
easy, obvious decisions, to make the hard ones and to get them right. And to be fair with the recruitment, they've done a really good job at that. Um, I think that Amorim might be one of their only blemishes, really. When you look at what their recruitment, I mean, obviously you talk about what happened in the football department with Brailsford and what have you, and with Dan Ashworth and all that. You could argue there was mistakes made there. The Ten Hag decision, I would say yes, those are two bad decisions. But I'm talking about player recruitment; they've got that right. But it's not an exact science. There's risk involved. It's a healthy kind of risk. The dichotomy they had between Ruben Amorim and Michael Carrick was completely different between the one they're having between Michael Carrick and a new manager. You don't want to break it. Again, sometimes you stumble upon a solution. I don't have any concerns about any correlations with Solskjaer where there's a fear of them being repeated. I don't know what that is. If someone can tell me, well, they're afraid, they want to learn from the Solskjaer situation, learn what? What is it that you're afraid of repeating that will result in Michael Carrick failing? Because it can't be just because they were two ex-players who were caretaker managers who got the job, right? I mean, that's not a reason for someone to fail. There has to be something that's much more causal. It's much more obvious that says this is a really big problem. This is what Ineos get paid for. Is there are certain things within Michael Carrick's characteristics, day-to-day habits, where Ineos are going to be really fortunate in that you very rarely get to have a choice between a candidate. You get to see this up close and someone else because they really only have to watch one candidate, and that's the competitor to Michael Carrick because they see Michael Carrick every single day.
Mm.
I do think that we're at a point where you need to make a decision one way or another because pre-season the World Cup's in 4 weeks. You have to move now.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that you've referenced, and it is the only thing that's actually credible here, is recruitment. There's a pretty good track record with recruitment for playing staff. And it's the one thing that Carrick hasn't been afforded. He's achieved everything that he's achieved without that. I know there's so many people that seem to draw back on this necessity of underplaying his tactical prowess and completely disregarding the likes of Steve Holland in the background. It's something that we have stated many times, we've spoken about many times. If this was anybody that wasn't associated with Manchester United Football Club previously, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But recruitment is everything here. And, I read so many things like you can only wait 30 minutes and you'll see a link with a different player. The likes of Joe Bellingham has now been thrown around the place in the last 2 hours as well. Jaap Stam has come out and stated that Frankie de Jong should be top of Manchester United's list this summer, as if we haven't heard that record before. But The decision that really shook a lot of people, and it is one that should interest us massively. It's something that we've spoken about previously. It what occurring at Real Madrid with Federico
Hmm.
Valverde and Armenian Tchouameni, because
Hmm.
there's a lot of real credible individuals. There's a lot of nonsense, first and foremost. Let's call that out. But there's a lot of real credible individuals in Spain that are now citing a lot of dressing room unrest. That there's a lot of senior figures in that dressing room that have turned their back on Valverde and are siding with Tchouameni, which is leading to this possibility that a 27-year-old Uruguayan who's at his peak of his powers, someone that we discussed previously, that we should be trying to model a midfield around the characteristics of a player like that he might just be available. And if a player like that is available, do you look at all the trauma? Do you look at all the aggro that's being caused in this dressing room in Madrid at this moment in time and think that there's no possibility that that's going to be recreated here? Or do you look at the player, the capabilities, and do you try to take a punt, given how much money it's going to cost to take him from Madrid to Manchester, regardless of the issues that they have?
Yeah, you look at why he fell out. You look at
Mm,
what were the reasons, because human beings do this all the time, right? We go home and fight with our wives or husbands or your whatever. But that's part of what a relationship is that you have ups, you have downs, you have, you have angry moments, you have tempestuous moments. You're not going to be able to go out and buy a footballer on the market where that's not a potential with them, because human beings do that. Shaun, these types of what I can't understand is why Real Madrid want to they want to broadcast this like it's some type of telenovela where there's an update every single day and there's more drama, and you know these types of things happen in football clubs every single day. I mean, I
mhm.
remember Scott McTominay banging Zidane Iqbal. No one heard about it, right? And these things happen every single day. They happen in any recreational team. They happen in any office. So I don't think it's a big issue the two guys got in a fight.
Just
It all
remember Gino
depends.
and Schmeichel all those years
Yeah,
ago.
I mean, come on, right? What do people think is happening in these dressing rooms? Managers getting knocked out, Wayne Rooney getting knocked out in his kitchen. These are things that are happening all the time, right? They just don't make it out. Boys will be boys. So I'm not really worried about the fact that they had a bit of a dust up. It would all depend on what the reasons were. If there was, there's certain indicators that you can look at with someone's behavior characteristics, like that caused that. I mean, if you look, why was Ruud van Nistelrooy kicked out of Manchester United? Because if Ronaldo had been a year or two older, he'd have got smacked too over his comments relative to his father, and his dad and Carlos Queiroz. And these things happen all the time. How many times did Roy Keane do this? How many times is Roy Keane thrown through windows? Right? I mean, this is a normal part of life. It would just depend on why. But you can get Valverde or Tchouameni out of that football team, world class midfielders in their prime. Well, you do everything you can to get them. It's very rarely will you get that opportunity. And look, Real Madrid always have some type of clear out if they don't win La Liga. We saw a pretty entertaining press conference yesterday from
That's
Florentino
for
Perez.
sure.
One or two players are going to play with their heads, I'm sure. But yeah, I would be all over either one of them.
Yeah, a lot of people obviously don't have a whole lot of good things to say about Manuel Ugarte during his time at the club. But if there's anything that Uruguayan can do and that compatriot in having a chat with Valverde and maybe saying, it's all good over here, it hasn't worked for me, it might work for you, then I think a lot of United fans would welcome him with open arms. I know there might be a little bit of skepticism, a little bit of worry. Is he going to come in and is he going to damage the dressing room? I don't see stuff like that happening because, in all honesty, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's very easy to believe a couple of reports on social media, but this sort of stuff happens so regularly. It just so happens on this time one fella got the better in another way, and he hit him pretty hard. But when you're looking outside of that, it would appear as though Tchouameni is going to remain in Madrid. It does look like Valverde is going elsewhere. If something like that is possible, you imagine it's going to cost a pretty penny to be able to get him. And this is where it all ties into what we've spoken about previously with these shrewd acquisitions, because it's not just enough to bring one player to the football club, Phil. And I don't want to go down this route of getting back into a conversation about VAR and officiating because it breaks my heart. But when you're looking at what you saw the last day with Arsenal and West Ham and everything that occurred at the end of that game, and then you see Spurs ultimately being denied a penalty near the end of that as well, it's still very much in the boiler there. There's only 2 points in the mix with two fixtures left between West Ham and Spurs. But should West Ham go down, Then you got a player like Mateus Fernandez, who is, 21 years of age. I was looking at comparisons of him recently as to how he could complement a midfield that coexisted with Kobe Mainu. And I always speak about this. I've said this to so many people that I've talked about on the podcast. I crave this lovely yin and yang midfield where you've got individuals that complement each other, that one can help the other to really maximize their skill set, whereas the other can look to really compensate for any flaws that they may have. And when you're looking at modern football, especially with a trio in midfield, I really like the graph of what I'm seeing. I really like, let's say, the outgoing metrics and the figures and everything that's assembled from bringing in players of a skill set of Mateus Fernandez. And especially the thing that makes him even more desirable is the fact that if they go down, they don't really have that much to haggle with in terms of how much they want to actually bring in for. You get a player like Mateus Fernandez at Manchester United, who's Premier League proven for £40 million. You have to snap their hand off for it, don't you?
Take another Portuguese midfielder called Fernandes, no problems. Look, what we're going to see with these midfielders is there has to be two key things that we don't know for them to do specific jobs. One, they have to be compatible personality-wise, right? So that they all like each other, they're all willing to do certain things they don't want to do. And two, whatever they're being asked to do in midfield is producing results. And as long as you can do that, then you can get these players to play a certain way in a system that maybe isn't completely exactly how they want to play, but it's good enough to get them results week in, week out. Mateus Fernandez, I don't watch enough of West Ham to make a really educated assessment on him. I will say this. I think he cost West Ham with a chance that, for some bizarre reason, he went the wrong side of the goalkeeper. Surely that has to go across the other side of the goalkeeper. If he does something like that for United in a key game, he's going to face a different type of backlash. Okay, players aren't brilliant every week, but that was a key moment where I felt, I want to see this is where you look like a big game player to me, or do your bollocks drop in a big game. I don't know. I'm not going to make a verdict on him or a final assessment on him, but I don't know. That concerns me a bit. Maybe I'm being overly harsh.
He's still only 21 years of age, though.
Yeah, probably being overly harsh, but that's a key moment where it's such an obvious wrong decision to me. But anyone can make a wrong decision in the heat of the moment. I suppose it's not career defining, but I like him. He's a very talented player, skillful. I've seen from the highlights and clips that I've seen of him, he looks very, very talented. I've been vehemently against United going out and paying, a 100+ million fee for Elliot Anderson. I think that should be spread around. Obviously, Ederson's another player that's being heavily linked with United, which does look like it has legs. But I think that's a type of midfielder. Instead of spending 130 million on Elliot Anderson, there's going to be other football clubs that don't sign Elliot Anderson that can compete for the top trophies in the world. So United should be able to do that without signing Elliot Anderson.
I'm glad you said that. It is one of the most defining conversations that's happening amongst the Manchester United fan base right now, because I think you'd be rather fickle if you were to look at Elliot Anderson and not appreciate his skill set, what he can bring to a team, what he can potentially bring to a team, because I think that's probably the most important thing. Just because he's doing it at Nottingham Forest doesn't mean he's going to do it in Manchester. Doesn't mean he's going to do it at City. Doesn't mean he's going to do it at United. But he has everything on paper to be a top midfielder leading a top football club towards perennial honours. And I think everybody can appreciate that. So when you've got the capabilities and the potential to be able to bring a player like that into your football club, surely you go out of your way to try and do everything you can to get him. That would be my stance on it. However, on the flip side of it, if you don't get him, that doesn't mean you have to rip everything up and start again. And this is something I've been trying to have conversations with people for many, many weeks. I would be one of Elliot Anderson's number one fans. I would love it if we could bring him to the football club. At the same time, if we don't, I don't think that means everything is done and dusted, because there is so many top tier players available. Like you've mentioned with Ederson, you can paint very easy pictures as to how a deal like that is possible, given the track record that Manchester United have with Atalanta as well. You brought in Rasmus Højlund, you brought in Abbott in previous seasons. A deal is there to be done. Personal terms will never be a problem. It's just this is the defining summer, not only for the football club under Ineos, but for Michael Carrick. And too many people are getting fixated on individuals as opposed to the greater cause that's at play here. You're seeing Casemiro speaking so openly and so heartfelt about his time at the football club and what it means to him to have played there, how much it's going to mean to him to go to line out at Old Trafford one final time. You've got players like Manuel Ugarte leaving. Michael Carrick is going to be judged on so much more than results. And that's already evident because the results are irrelevant now to people. People are building these agendas and these narratives and these platforms just based on predetermined expectations and opinions that they do not want to alleviate. It's stigmas, and it's the most unnecessary thing in the world, but it's what always happens with Manchester United. So when we're looking at this summer, it's all about how much is actually in the bank and how much we're able to spend to bolster this team. And if it's a situation you have 150, 200 million to spend, surely it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to drop 120 or 130 of that on Elliot Anderson, as you're saying. So it does make far more sense to spread it out and to build a squad that is capable of challenging on multiple fronts as opposed to blowing your entire load on one player and hoping that an unknown variable from God only knows where who comes in for 15 million can make up all the rest of the squad dimensions. It just doesn't work that way, Phil.
Nah, it wouldn't be financially prudent to do that. If you have 130, 40 million spent, you don't spend it on one player.
Mm.
I mean, you would be unless you want to resell. There's a resale value 2 years down the line or something where that makes sense as an investment, which there won't be, obviously. Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think that United have to be much more financially prudent. United have much greater needs. The thing is, if you squander all that on one player, that one player becomes almost meaningless to you because of the holes in the other aspects of the team. Because that player can't win those games by themselves, and their value will drop, their consistency will drop, the performance levels will drop because they need other players around them. So it's going to be, even with City, Shaun. I mean, how many players can you think in the Premier League that have gone for 100 million that have actually worked out and met their price tags and met and been close to close to that valuation? I almost none. I mean, I can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, think about Isak and Verts. I mean, neither of. I mean, obviously Isak's had injuries, but Verts doesn't look anywhere near that. And so, to me, I think, yeah, I wouldn't be disappointed with someone like an Ederson, maybe someone of around the six. If you could get someone like Ederson and Valverde, I would be absolutely ecstatic.
Oh, that'd be phenomenal, yeah. But the weight of transfers, it's so bizarre, and it seems to be getting a little bit crazier every single year. Tell me, am I missing something? With Anthony Gordon, how exactly is Anthony Gordon bordering 100 million on the route to Bayern Munich at this moment in time? Have I missed something along the way? Is there a far greater footballer in there than I am seeing, or is the market just gone completely barmy?
I'm asking the same question you're asking me. I mean, I've never once in my life thought that he's anywhere close to £100 million player. It really makes me question, like, the traditional routes of Bayern Munich would go down to sign players of that caliber, and where are all those talent pipelines? Have they all dried up? To me, I don't see that happening. I don't see them going for anywhere close to that. I mean, Barcelona were supposedly interested too, and when Newcastle quoted their price tag, I mean, assuming this reporting is correct, there was a collective laughter in the room. I don't blame Newcastle for asking silly money for him if you can get it, but I mean, come on.
It just seems to
I'd be
be.
disappointed. I would not be happy if United signed him.
No, God, no.
I wouldn't swap him for any player in United's team.
It's like I said recently, like, I try to pride myself on watching as much football as I possibly can outside of all the other duties I have as a father and a husband and whatnot. But
Don't
I
get
just,
taken, bro.
I just don't see it. But you see, the thing is, this is why there needs to be so much credence now in modern day and looking at what you have coming up through the academies. And it's something that I put more and more stock on every single year I get older, because I try to give as much attention towards the academies as I possibly can. And, obviously tomorrow evening, Thursday evening, the under
Mm.
18s are going for another shot at FA Youth Cup glory against City. There's some splendid footballers, albeit look at 18 level. It's fairly rare that one of those guys is capable to come in and impact the senior first team in the Premier League. But this is another extremely talented young crop, with
Mm-hmm.
marshalled by the likes of JJ Gabriel, 15 years of age, Noah Jai. You got
Very.
Chido Obi, who is probably closest of all of them, given his age, his size, the fact that he has previous first team experience. And there's maybe one or two of those outside of what we've already seen from your under 21s and whatnot, from Shea Lacey, from the Fletcher brothers, for example. That there's definitely plenty of talent that's in there. As you said, we'll never know if they're going to be able to do it unless they can get an opportunity in the senior level. But can save you that 30, that 40 million acquisition that you've no idea if it's going to come to fruition there. But you're going for the FA Youth Cup on Thursday. I'm after touching on, we might as well stick with it. We're going for a 12th title, the first since 2022. Obviously, that team consisted of Kobe Mainu, Alejandro Garnacho. Garnacho didn't work. It's unfortunate, but that was another prime example of the talent that can exist within an academy. Going up against the City side, who have 4 titles, going for a 5th. Obviously, they were beaten last year in the final against Aston Villa. They're after pipping United by, was it 4 points in the Premier League North? And each of them took a scalp off each other during the season. United beat City when they went to the ground. They beat them 3-1 in February, I believe. But there's every opportunity that United can go out there and capture something that is very cherished, very precious to this football club on Thursday. And with the players that are there, marshalled by Darren Fletcher, who's done an extremely good job, it's the very least I feel they deserve this season, Phil.
Yeah, look, United have got it right. At the youth level, I think when they brought in Nick Cox, of course, he's no longer there, but the whole perspective change and cultural change in United's definition of success with young players is getting them into the first team. It's not necessarily winning FA Youth Cups. If you can do both, great. And this is where I feel there's a bit of a dilemma where some people are saying, oh, Shea Lacey, you shouldn't be playing for the first team because commitments he has on the 21 level. And I want to see those players playing in the first team more than I want to see them win an FA Youth Cup or anything like that, because if we can't get those young players into 2 dead rubber games at the end of the season, then how do we get them into the team next season when those games count? This is the ultimate target for a young player, is get in that first team. That's more important than anything you will do at youth level. That is the ultimate goal. That is the ultimate target for these youth coaches and these youth players. Is if you're offered a chance to play in an FA Youth Cup final or United's first team, you take United's first team. And I hope that even if some of them do play on Thursday, when United's games on Sunday.
Sunday, yeah.
Yeah. So they'd still be in contention for it. But very encouraging signs at youth level that there's a few players that are on the cusp that have the talent to make it. I know Ibrahimov was called up to the Russian national team as well. Very talented young players. So yeah, there's a lot of really, really talented youngsters down there that are very, very encouraging for the future.
There is a lot, and it's not just at Manchester United. There's an awful lot of talent at the under 18 level across the country, which really goes leaps and bounds to showing how a 15-year-old being awarded the under 18 Premier League Player of the Season in JJ Gabriel, just how wonderfully talented that boy is. I know it's very easy for online to start losing their rag when they start speaking about the likes of Max Dowman at Arsenal and what is achievable for young guys coming into the first team. But at 15 years of age, JJ Gabriel, we've spoken about him before. It's probably easier count the people who haven't heard of JJ and what he's capable of. But we're now going to get further investment into this topic that I brought to you previously about the pressures that are going to be put on Manchester United to start giving him senior appearances, because the list is your arm long across the continent of clubs that are prying in to try and steal him away from Manchester United. And if he's not been given those opportunities, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep him at the football club. So I would absolutely love it. I don't see it happening for Sunday, But last game of the season away to Brighton, wouldn't it be
I think
fantastic?
he can play. I don't think he can play till he's 16, right?
Oh, that's correct. No. Joe, that's yeah. So JJ was registered for the FA Cup, wasn't it? He was registered for the FA Cup panel.
I think he can play in
Um,
the Premier League next season, but I agree that if he's not given those chances, United will find it hard to hang on to him. I think he'll get those chances. I think United have demonstrated at every aspect, every opportunity they could relative to him, that they're committed to his future. They desperately don't want to lose him. He's such an obvious, outstanding talent. He's already aware that he could go to any football club in the world right now. No one needs to go make big pitches to him. If JJ Gabriel wants to go to your football club and his father calls your club, Joe, then they're going to take him. So I think from what I've seen, from what his dad puts out, there is a definite understanding that there's a process that has to be adhered to. Having an ex-professional footballer as a father helps. They're obviously, I'd be raising up my son too. I'd be, not what the kids say. I would be celebrating him too and exaggerating about his talent, but also I think that it's important that this kid, because we talked about Alejandro Garnacho, the next stage in their development has nothing to do with ability. It has to do with cognitive ability. It has to do with how they matured, and now with these young phenoms, if JJ Gabriel has a couple of good games for United next season, he's going to get Lamine Yamal treatment. And then it's a question of how do you isolate him? What is the group around him like? Is there a lot of people? I think it helps him having a father who's an ex-professional footballer and knows what to look for and knows how to separate the bullshitters away from, because inevitably he's going to attract that and try to keep his feet on the ground, because I still think United's probably one of the top 3 clubs in the world to be at if you're a young player.
Well, it's what we spoke about previously, that if you surround yourself with individuals that tell you what you want to hear all the time, then ultimately you're going to fall foul on your arse. And you would like to think that his dad has a little bit of experience to be able to navigate that sort of situation, Phil. And every indication that we've got so far has been just that. It's just tremendously exciting that we have this 15-year-old. We have him, and it's not just him. As I said, there's so many talented players in that football team, and there's so many talented players in the 21s that are just yearning for an opportunity to be given that chance. And when you're looking at what we saw the last day against Sunderland, there was, I know it's, as you said, dead rubber fixtures, but there was some abject performances in there from individuals that have been starved from first team minutes for quite some time. This bodes back on what we were saying for the last couple of months, that if they don't get onto the field regularly, especially when you've got limited opportunities, then you're not going to look $1 million when you actually get on the field in the first place. And this really underlines the necessity for premium squad depth, because if you're going to be enduring that type of a fall off when you're replacing first team players, it's not going to end well for Michael Carrick. It's not going to end well for the squad. So what exactly are you expecting now when we're looking at 2 outings left, one at Old Trafford, one away to Brighton in the final season? How exactly, if you're in Carrick's seat, are you managing this? Because you have your 6 points. You have a 6-point lead on Liverpool and Villa with 6 points remaining. Goal differences there. You're pretty much assured third place, barring some sort of a calamity. I know he wants that, because he's going to want that. That's always going to stand to him in his CV, because, as I said previously, top 3 finishes are far and few between for this football club. But how do you now go about the great dynamic of managing the expectations of would-be first-team players that are squad options, and also those talented youngsters that we need to get some bit of an idea of outside of pre-season football?
Look, I think Carrick's pre-season's already started. And I think that's why it's important to make an announcement so that he can already prepare for next season with this season, and use these last 2 games to get a look and to get answers to some questions. He might not get those answers to those questions that he needs by putting certain young players in, but at least he'll be much more informed than what he would be if he doesn't. Very rarely do you get the opportunity to have competitive professional Premier League fixtures that are dead rubbers, where you can put young players in and get to see how they respond to dealing with all the new pressures of being a first team Manchester United player playing in front of, you've got a game at Old Trafford, so you've got the option of playing these young players at home and away. And look, as far as the players go, well, it's hard to come in and perform when you've been out of the squad. Yeah, but why are you out of the squad? Why are you not getting game time? One of the main reasons why that's you're, the likes of Xerxes and these other players, you're not good enough. You'd be getting more game time. And I'm sorry, this is Manchester United. You don't get 4 or 5 opportunities. This is, you get 1 or 2 opportunities, and if you don't take them, you might not get another. And there are certain players to me that I'm looking at going, there's some of these players out there that have already or are already aware they're not staying here next season, and you're getting that type of stroll in the park performance. That's like there's no dividend to me to go out here and give 200% because there's no reward that I'm going to realize or recognize. I'm going somewhere else. You could see it. I think for the likes of Mason Mount and stuff, we need to see more from him. I feel for him a bit in that he was played in a role that's probably not his best, and he gave 100%. But we're sitting here. What is it? This is 3rd season.
It is his 3rd season, I believe. Yes.
Yeah.
It's
I don't know.
a tough one for him, but like injuries have been absolutely catastrophic.
100%. Totally sympathize with him. I mean, he's going to be as devastated as anyone that's not a contribution consistent with his qualities and what he's capable of contributing. But again, this is United. It's ruthless, and United can't afford to be carrying players. I don't think there's a market for him to go anywhere. But I want to see players, when they get an opportunity, give 200% and play like a player that wants to get picked next week, rather than use the excuse that, well, I haven't played for a while, so I'm a bit rusty. You haven't played for a while because you're not good enough.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, I suppose, just going off your last statement there, and this isn't trying to big up Mount, I will always stand by this situation and the fact that the greatest attribute any player can have is availability, regardless of how much I admire them. You can never really criticize his commitment levels when he's on the field, because he does get himself about. He does try. He is constantly trying to win the ball back. He's trying to constantly make something happen. I don't know, can the same be said for the likes of Joshua Xerxes? Because he looks like a guy whose head is maybe somewhere else. And it's strange because even if his head was somewhere else, unless there's something already agreed with another club, you'd expect players like that to be playing for their next move. This is something that we grew up with. You'd be looking at individuals coming toward the end of the season that they're playing for a new contract, or they're playing for a club, they're playing for a move elsewhere. And there's certain players within the football club that I just can't quite fathom what it is going on in their heads. It's almost like, I'm here now, and that's good enough, and it should never be good enough. But that statement that I'm stating about availability being the greatest asset for any footballer, that leads to the ongoing conversation that you're seeing now regarding Lisandro Martinez and Matthias de Ligt. And it's something that Andy Minton has been speaking about quite a lot lately, in that there's some uncertainty possibly drawing about Lisandro Martinez. And it's something that worries me, because I say this unashamedly. When he's on the football field, I think he's actually my favourite footballer at the club. I love what he does. I think as a defender, he's one of the greatest ball-playing assets on the planet in the game. I think he's exceptional. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary critique on his height, but he's a very good defender, extremely good on the ball, makes a lot of things tick in transition. But ultimately, if you're spending most of your time in your arse in the physio table, it's not really benefiting the football team, is it?
Or getting stupidly sent off in games. Like, to me, I think it's this is the reality. Martinez needs to be on the pitch. I think he is a brilliant player. I think he is transformative. I think that United really missed him. Massive credit to Aidan Heaven, by the way, who has in some ways rendered Martinez's question a different one. Because United didn't have another left-footed centre back, and now they do. Look, maybe we see something similar to what Victor Lindelof does at Aston Villa and plays in midfield. I think Martinez is certainly capable of filling in that defensive midfield role. I know that Ten Hag didn't want to play him there, and I don't think Amorim particularly did, which probably is the best endorsement for him playing defensive midfield that you're going to get. So, I think, yeah, look, he's a player that owes United, in my opinion. I think that he owes United a period of, as you were saying, availability. I think he owes United a period of consistency, and no more silly sendings off. No more. If Martinez gets another long-term injury, then I think United can't renew his contract. I think they just have to accept it. That's again, I don't blame him for those injuries, but there's certain things that I think he could have done better on.
Agreed. Even there at the weekend, there was a moment where you're looking at it and you're,
Uh-huh. I thought the same thing. I'm like, if he gets sent off here,
yeah,
this is going
yeah,
to be a pivotal moment in my attitude towards him. I was going to say it actually, and forgot.
yeah. It's a real worry, and it's that sort of it's often put down to this characteristic of being an over aggressive South American that you see, that they don't mind putting in those challenges and they
I
don't
love
mind
that
getting.
right away. I
It's
I, I,
lovely.
I think that's wonderful characteristic. I love it. That there's, I mean, we're. It's not like we can have any complaints about being labeled as a bit snidey, because the Irish are certainly not known for that themselves. But I think there's something wonderful about that characteristic in players and in people in general.
Yeah, agreed. But then at the same time, you need a little bit of common sense as well. And like you said, when you're coming back from an unnecessary suspension, albeit however harsh it may have been, you surely have to have a bit of common sense that let's not replicate this and just put the team in another awkward situation heading out of the season and just leave supporters really frustrated with me.
Completely
As
agree.
I said, look, I love him, and I'll unashamedly say it. I generally don't have favorite players at Manchester United, but ever since he came to the club, I fell in love with the way he plays. I love the
I
attitude.
love.
I love everything about it. But the problem is, if you're not playing, unfortunately, you're not really benefiting anybody. And it's a similar conversation with Mason Mount. You know,
Exactly.
I've been on podcasts. You know, I bring it back years when the speculation started surfacing about Mason Mount could potentially make the move north, go from Chelsea to United. Initially,
Mhm.
I was totally underwhelmed by it. I was thinking, what are we actually doing
Same.
here? And then I really looked into it, and I looked at his backstory, and I said, you know what, this guy's actually a hell of a lot better than I gave him credit for. And then I really invested myself in him. I thought, yeah, this guy's a good footballer. This fella can do a lot of things. Since he's arrived at the football club, he seems to get injured by looking at a football, let alone kicking one. And, he's earning a lot of money. He's earning an awful lot of money. And players like this, like ultimately, what do you contribute? And I think, look, it's a fair conversation and a fair statement to say if we hadn't have been so ridiculous and getting knocked out of the cups at the first point, like there would have been more opportunities there. If you perform well in a cup outing away to Oxford, or if you're playing against Middlesbrough or someone and you give a good performance, then maybe you earn yourself 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the end of the next league game, and then you can earn yourself a starting berth with another impressive. So players like that have probably fallen under the wayside with it, and they've ultimately been, not necessarily mismanaged, but they have been victims of our overall incompetence. But therein, when you're looking into a summer whereby there's such necessity to bring in X, Y, and Z and specific tailored players, maybe that will be enough to give them another 12 months. Albeit, I can't see anybody urging to renegotiate contract terms and tie them down for the foreseeable future at the football club.
Nah, but what meant to me, Sean, like there were signs before he came that this was something that United should expect. It wasn't a total shock that he came in and has been picked up. And he was heavily injured in his last season. Chelsea, I think his last season, Chelsea only played 13 games. So, I think that was a factor in how they were negotiating a new contract with him. So United knowingly took a risk on a player that is constantly injured. Um, he's loved by the managers who he plays for. So clearly he has something about him that managers who know football inside out clearly love. And again, it's really frustrating for him because he, the football's filled with this is like honestly another warning to the likes of JJ Gabriel and stuff. Things outside of your control can completely curtail and change your career, and success is not a guarantee. Mason Mount's just a very unfortunate player that has lost a significant amount of his career, that can't get momentum that he badly needs to get in the England team or to get back in the United team to be consistent. And I've never had confidence that if you were to say to me, if Mason Mount was to lead the football club right now, what would I be devastated that we've lost? I can't think of anything. Now, if you said that to me about Casemiro,
Yeah.
Obvious. We're losing his goals, his leadership. You're saying that about Bruno Fernandes. Obvious, right? Sesko, obvious. Mason Mount, I don't know yet. That we should have an answer to that question at this stage. You should have certain characteristics about you that, we talk about Lissandro Martinez. I would know what we're losing with Lissandro Martinez. Well, Mason Mount, I don't know. And I would love for him. In some sense, he's a bit like an Anthony Martial in that he has enormous talent, but just can never stay fit.
Yeah, it's a pretty good comparison, actually. And, when you're looking at Sunday now, it'll be the last Old Trafford outing of the season.
Mm.
It's going to be very emotional with Casemiro. That's almost certain. And he deserves that. He deserves the greatest send-off he could possibly get. I would have loved it if a decision had been made on the manager, that Carrick could have been announced as the next permanent manager at Old Trafford last game, get that vibes, get everything up and bolstered. But the one thing that you will see is at the end when, the applause has been given and players are thanking supporters, you'll see who's given an extra animated wave at the crowd and who's saying an extra, maybe a little bit of a goodbye, and that'll paint a picture about what we could see in the summer. But as I said, 6 points, it gives an opportunity, even with a draw on Sunday, to guarantee third place. And what's funny actually as well is with Bournemouth and Brighton, they're both within touching distance of Liverpool and Arsenal. So, or not Liverpool and Arsenal, Liverpool and Aston Villa. So that's quite interesting that they might have aspirations of pipping them if something goes a little bit askew with those guys at the end of the season. But we don't know, are we going to see academy? We don't know, are we going to see a heavily rotated first team? We don't know, is he going to go with the tried and tested? But what are you expecting, or at least anticipating to see on Sunday against Nottingham Forest, who are also safe from relegation themselves?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Does Carrick want to do what he did against Sunderland and make all those changes? I don't know. And players are not going to want to miss out. Players are going to want to play football. Of course, there's the World Cup. It's right around the corner. So you see players getting put out of that World Cup with injuries, and no one wants that to happen. I think Carrick, has to behave like he has a job, in my opinion. If he can find ways to win at the weekend by giving young players a chance, then if that decision hasn't been made, and I know it shouldn't come down to things like this, but these are all things that make it extremely difficult to say no and to not reward. If you could make a Manchester United manager in a lab, it would be someone that understands the football club, that values youth, that has a pathway to the first team, that plays attacking football a certain way, that wins games. I know Carrick doesn't tick all of those boxes yet. We have to see a better, consistent playing style next season. But we have to wait and respect that requires him to get the players that he needs, just like we've done with every other manager, and just like Ruben Amorim needed to. But I would like to see there's going to be certain open questions this summer, Shaun, about which young players can make that jump. I'd like to have a better informed opinion on that by this summer through the last 2 games, with giving them some game time.
Oh, 100%. Look, I put it on paper yesterday. I've been saying it for as long as I can remember. If they're good enough, they're old enough. Yeah, that's what the principles of this football club is based on. That is our mantra. That's the ethos of this football club. If they're good enough, they're old enough. And there's several players that are quite clearly too good for the level that they're at. Mm-hmm. So the only way you're going to be able to determine if they can do it. And look, it's not going to necessarily be the most competitive game of football against Forest, given what both are playing for. But at the very, very least, if you're going into a ground that's nearly got 80,000 people there, it's the last game of the season, there should be some earthly desire to win. And if you can't let a couple of young lads get out there, as you said, I think it was either myself or yourself said it last week, when there was no real certainty about who was going to be the permanent manager next season, Carrick could go out there and Carrick could give young lads an opportunity to prove themselves. And he's doing a favour to the next permanent manager. It now looks like that's him. So surely you want to give yourself as much of an advantage going into the preseason. If you want to treat these last 2 games as an early preseason, as you said, do that as well. But give yourself as much of an advantage heading into next season to see how many of these youth players you can bring into the first team that are rotation options, that are credible options in the last 15, 20 minutes. and really go about embracing the ethos that Sir Matt Busby said. Because I think if you do that, he'll actually win over an awful lot of the supporters that are against him at this moment in time as well.
Well, I think that all having that decision made before the weekend may very well may very well impact how Carrick names a starting lineup, because he's not trying to win the game to get the job anymore. He's not afraid to lose the game and therefore take bigger risks. I don't know. It'd be interesting. It'd be have to see, of course, who's also fit, if Sesko returns or not. But yeah, look, I think that I think he's going to get the job, Shaun. I think that is the
Right.
most likeliest outcome, and I think it needs to be decided before this weekend so that United can go into this last game at Old Trafford this weekend with a manager whose future is secure, and also so they can go to the market and for players that they're interested in, be able to tell them who's going to be your manager, because that's a massive factor on whether a player picks your football club or not. Those are questions that can't be opened going into the summer, and I think that I don't see any point in delaying it. I mean, unless you're not planning on hiring Michael Carrick, then why wouldn't you announce it?
It's as simple and as complicated as that. And if only we could push that button, Phil. If only we could do it. Maybe someone there needs to start listening to us, and God only knows what we could
I'm
achieve.
not. I could still man an argument against Michael Carrick. Don't get me wrong, right? I'm not. I'm 50-50 on it, right? Because I don't know. I don't have confident answers to the big questions. Not can Carrick stabilize his football club and get it into the top three. Let's be honest.
You're more so concerned about how is he going to be able to rotate a squad with multiple competitions.
I'm also looking at the fact that this is a top four that the other teams keep losing, right? I mean, it's not the most difficult top four to get into. Next season, when Carrick is facing, you're not a caretaker manager anymore. Now you're not just rating the ship. Now you're just not the honeymoon manager. Now you're not the stand-in student teacher. Now this is your class. Now this is about decisions that you are responsible for, that you have to bet on a playing style. I think that United have to significantly improve next season. Can Carrick bring about that improvement? I don't know. I don't know what his final product is going to look like. He won't be perfect. Ruben Amorim was doing a different job than the one Michael Carrick was doing. Ruben Amorim was never a caretaker manager. He just had to steady the ship. Ruben Amorim was trying to implement ideas, a playing style, a certain structure, and making long-term decisions for players. That's a harder job, much harder job than coming in and saying, okay, we just need to, find autopilot here. So I think there are certain open questions. I just think that there isn't a lot of great options out there. I'm not 100% sold on Areola either. And that's the other problem, is that whatever alternative you come to me with, I'm not 100% sold on them either.
Yeah, and that's what makes next season such an unknown variable. But at the very, very least, if we can go into the summer with an assured plan and an agreed vision between management and players, you're giving yourself the best option in moving forward and the best opportunity to be able to gain some semblance of success. It's just all about what the agreement of that success is between sporting department and management in the summer. Because, I mean, obviously we need to see a more clear, defined way of playing, but you'd like to think that that's going to come with the correct recruitment in the summer, with a good pre-season, underlining philosophies that not only Michael Carrick but Steve Holland are laying out here. And look, all you can have is blind hope and blind faith. And I go into the same mind frame every single summer, that I feel like something is going to click and we're going to see something different. But the one thing that I have this summer looking at it is that if we can achieve a proper midfield overhaul, this is something we have been crying out for as long as I can remember. If we can actually achieve a proper midfield overhaul, I genuinely believe all of the other problems will eventually start fading out, because games are won and lost in the centre of midfield. And as long as we continue to go about with square pegs and round holes, Phil, we're going to be speaking about the same thing. We could be doing this podcast in 3 years and we're going to be having the same conversation, and it could be anybody managing the football club.
I think one of those characteristics they have to look for in players is players who have no track record of injuries. If you've
Mm.
got a player that's, Edison's 37, I don't, or 27, sorry, I don't know what his injury record is like, but I think it's relatively good. He's been consistently available. Those are the types of players United need, where they're sending athletes whose body can stand up to the rigors of professional football and who are available. One thing that Jim Ratcliffe mentioned about, I think it was Amorim, might have been Ten Hag, where he goes, you talk about how much the squad costs, but how much of that's actually available to him. And the players that are actually available to him, if you calculate their cost, it's paltry in comparison to our rivals. United need the same players that are available week in, week out.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can only hope that they achieve some semblance of that, as I said. And it's a pretty fitting way to end today, I think. Thank you, one and all, as always, for giving us your time. It's been great. I hope this was up your alley. It kind of gets a bit monotonous when you're speaking about the same things week in, week out, but we do our best to give it a bit of justice. Phil has even gone off and given himself a shiner to be able to do that for you today. But we do appreciate every little bit of feedback you're giving, honestly. All the comments, all the messages, all the emails, keep them coming on social media. Keep the emails coming through to editor@theatre-of-red.com. And if there's anything you'd like to speak about in the future, by all means, just ask. Leave your feedback, leave your reviews. We'll get back to every single bit of it. And we will catch you all bright and early next week.
Much love, folks. Cheers, Shaun. All the best.
All the
Cheers,
best.
folks. Bye-bye.